Wow, the nerves. Okay, here we go.
Abortion has been designed to be a contraception for men to make a woman pregnant and walk and not take responsibility of their actions.
The question is, if you want to have 70 babies, have them. If you want to have one child, have that. If you want to have no children, do not have any children.
Whoever wants abortion on demand is not thinking about the women. They are thinking of anything else other than the women in question.
How many people willingly, right now even if you're to say there's 3 children outside that they can willingly adopt? Most people will have a choice.
Every person has a right to life.
Abortion is wrong. If you agree with this statement, please step forward.
Abortion. We start with a basic definition. It is an ordinary English word bringing something to an end. If you decide as moderator, you can abort this gathering. To Medics, abortion is anything that brings a pregnancy to an end, including the ordinary miscarriages. So for them, everything is what? An abortion. But the abortion that the Constitution prohibits is the abortion that is the deliberate killing of the pre-born person. Okay? That is the abortion that is wrong, the deliberate killing of a pre-born person. So all those who call themselves pro-choice are actually pro-death. The rest of us are pro-life.
If you just interrogate the genesis of abortion, and if you understand what eugenics is the idea that some people are a better species than others, are a better kind of people than others. And so Margaret Sanger is the one who propagated abortion on demand, and coming from the place of eugenics, where he believed that white people are better than black people. And so when abortion was popularized in America, it was put in the black settlements where black people are, because they wanted to terminate the lives of black people, because they were, actually she's quoted saying, and I quote, "The massive Negroes are still breeding carelessly and disastrously. They are more than the whites and least intelligent and fit." So that is the idea behind abortion, and that's why we are talking today about it, because now we are thinking about the most vulnerable and the most delicate human, which is an unborn baby, and we are thinking that they are less fit to be among us, and therefore we can terminate them at will.
All right, let's have the disagreeers join us.
Abortion is not wrong, because from the context of it, it's an autonomy and agency that women have over their bodies. And of course, even the language is weaponizing how it's seen, because even from the definition that it's a deliberate killing of a fetus, tries to center women to be discriminated on how they choose to exercise their right for their body. Looking at it from a rights perspective, we see that it's healthcare because it enables women to access information, to access care and services that enable them to make informed choices. And a good example is what our Constitution provides in circumstances where abortion can be provided. And to that extent, the law, or rather the conveners or persons who are able to seek conversations around why abortion should not be permitted, but of course in certain circumstances, it's because the reality of women and girls that we live in, they access abortion through unscrupulous ways and it harms their health. So it's not wrong to that extent that it's healthcare, and it enables women to have agency over their bodies to make decisions that are fit for them.
All right, Derek.
The question, abortion is wrong, invites us to have a philosophical conversation as opposed to a constitutional one or any other thing. Because the questions of right and wrong are philosophical questions. And right is something that differs, and right or wrong is something that differs from various contexts, various cultures, various societies. There is no universally agreeable term to, we would say this practice is wrong and this practice is right. Just very recently, for those that remember, it was wrong for women to walk around in town with certain forms of dresses, right? And we had the movement that was my dress, my choice, right? In certain African societies, it was considered a taboo for you to have twins. And twins could be thrown into the forest because it was wrong, right? And so for us to say what is right or wrong, we solve this question in a constitutional democracy by having the harmonization of a legal system and legal protections that then define what is right and what is wrong, and the wrong is then pursued through criminal sanctions. So it is wrong for you to lie to your girlfriend, but does that mean criminal sanctions should accrue? It is wrong, as the colonizers told us, for you to have 2 wives. And they implemented this by ensuring and even terming that the act of having 2 wives as being wife purchase, right? And so a woman could not, a woman was forced to, a polygamous woman was forced to testify as against her husband because they did not consider her to be married. It is just wife purchase. There's a case called Rex versus Amkeo that speaks to that. But in the case then of abortion, it would be absurd for us to sit on this stage and say that abortion is wrong when the Constitution has explicitly permitted for it to be committed in certain circumstances, right? It is absurd. So we would not have the provisions that we will debate here for the Constitution allowing abortion to be permitted in certain circumstances. And so what I would invite us to consider, as Mwavishi has rightfully pointed out, let us consider abortion as a healthcare service that women are entitled to, as opposed to something that ought to be debated as being right or wrong, and therefore, if wrong, the individuals that are practicing that quote-unquote abortion ought to be subjected to criminal sanctions. Our different beliefs, our different morality should not be the basis for the imposition of criminal sanctions for people that do what we deem as wrong or what they deem as right. Thank you.
All right. Hiya. Derek, I'm just going to ask you to try and angle yourself in a way where we can see you and
respond to you.
Yes, and respond, yes. Richard, should abortion be considered a healthcare service, like he has pointed out?
Thank you for raising that. Unfortunately, we don't have a medic on the panel. Maybe we have a medic in the house. To my lay person understanding, because I'm a lay person in medicine, there is no single diagnosis for which the prescription is abortion. As in, you are suffering from this disease and that abortion is the cure. Okay? There is no single prescription for which abortion is the prescription. You could talk of ectopic pregnancies. The woman is already in danger. Probably the baby in that tube is already dead. We move in to save the life of the mother. We don't move in to kill the baby. Good people, we are talking of the deliberate killing of a pre-born person, not a fetus. The Constitution calls the baby in the womb a person. While it is biologically the fetus, the Constitution refers to the baby in the womb as a person. So there is no single medical condition for which the cure is the deliberate killing of the preborn person. So we cannot treat abortion as health care. 2, women who go through abortion go through a terrible experience. They carry around the trauma for years. And this process of quickly getting them through that abortion most probably hurts women more than we think. So it cannot be healthcare.
And just to add on it, that when we talk about healthcare, and I like what Mwavishi has said, that women have a right to exercise their right to enjoy good healthcare. But we're talking about the healthcare of one person, and there's another person in the womb. That person also has a right, according to our constitution, to enjoy good healthcare because they are a person. And the constitution says that the life of a person begins at conception. So for that person to come out and enjoy other rights out of the womb, they need to be taken care of in the womb. So that person has the same rights as the mother who is carrying that person in the womb to enjoy health care. So when you say that abortion is health care and you are denying someone in the womb, a person in the womb, the right to health care, then it is not health care. You're killing that person. It's not health care. When there is one life lost, there's no health care there.
All right. I think because it's in response to what I said, I should have a first bite at the cherry in response. And I indicated that abortion is healthcare. This is a position that I will hold on to from the beginning of this debate, and I hope when we go home we hold on to it as well. So we start then to the guarantees of the right to health of a person in our Constitution. We go to Article 43 of our Constitution. If you have it, you can turn with me. All right?
Richard.
All right? Article 43 of our Constitution states that every person has the right to the highest attainable standard of health, which includes the right to healthcare services, including reproductive healthcare. We then move to Part 2 of Article 43, which speaks to a person shall not be denied emergency medical care. All right? That is where we find the questions of the right to health under our Constitution. But then, this is a right that is not extremely defined under that part. So, what other healthcare services is spoken about in our Constitution? It is the healthcare service that we are speaking about, and these questions of emergency care that is guaranteed under Article 26(4) of the Constitution. So turn back with me to Article 26(4) of the Constitution. Abortion is not permitted unless, in the opinion of a trained health professional, there is need for what? Emergency treatment, or the life or the health of the mother is in danger, or is permitted by any other written law. So Article 46 then recognizes that while there might exist a right to life to an individual, this right to life does not negate the provision of this essential service, that is an abortion, that is to be guaranteed under Kenyan law or to be provided in the cases where the life or the health of the mother is in danger or when it is permitted by the law. I want us to then turn to a case that is called Petition 227 of 2022, Rachel Mwikali versus the CS of Health. The conversations brought about by the panelists that have spoken introduce an individual that is called an unborn child, right? And they introduce this individual saying that they have rights that ought to be protected, either at par with the right of the mother that is carrying that child, or in any other case, and it has been argued before, in a manner that is superior to the rights of the mother. And this was tested because there was a policy that was developed that was called the National Reproductive Health Policy. When that policy was developed in 2022, at paragraph 12 of clause 3.4.2, they sought to introduce some consideration. So you have seen, when you have read Article 26.4, it has said that the healthcare provider should consider the life of who? The mother, right? But that policy said that the healthcare provider, in providing this essential service that is called abortion, should consider both the health and the life of the mother and that of the unborn child, right? So they were trying to introduce these conversations here. They wanted to put them in law. But we went to court and we challenged that particular provision. And at paragraph, I can just read out to you what the court said, so that you don't say Kimani came here to preach his own agenda, all right? So the court indicated, and at paragraph 157, that this question of both the mother and her unborn child to receive the highest attainable standard of health care is not recognized by our Constitution. And at paragraph 155 said that the health and the life of the mother should be the primary consideration above all else, all right? So they will tell you the Constitution recognizes an unborn child. Tell them to show us where, all right?
Okay, let me ask this. Richard, do you want to show us where?
Oh, yes. So let me respond to this question. I'm following. Friends, Article 26(1). Every person has a right to life. Article 26(2). The life of a person begins at conception. Article 26(3). No one shall be arbitrarily deprived of life except as permitted by the Constitution or any other written law. Article 26(4). Abortion is not permitted unless in the opinion, remember it is the opinion of a trained health professional, the life or health of the mother is in danger, all as may be permitted by any other written law. Now, take note, friends, this provision evolved from Boma's draft, Wako Kilifi draft, to the final document that we got. Boma's draft inserted the opinion of a registered medical practitioner. And that is very important, that a decision that involves the death of someone is better taken by a registered medical practitioner. They who take the Hippocratic oath, they who are not necessarily supposed to be pro-death. Now, the constitution that was offered to us by the committee of experts that led to its opposition by the people I talked to earlier lowered the caliber of he who forms the opinion from a registered medical practitioner to any trained health professional. And then it increased the grounds upon which that opinion could be formed. Not only the life of the mother being in danger, but the life or health of the mother. Now, when you check the WHO definition of health, even the mood swings you have in the first 3 months of pregnancy can be considered a threat to your health. Even poverty and stress can be considered a threat to your health. Meaning that the exception to abortion, to the prohibition of abortion, was meant to target the first two sub-articles. Life of a person begins at conception, and the life of a person begins, every person has a right to life, and the life of a person begins at conception. When you lower the caliber of he who forms the opinion, then it means we cannot have a written opinion for every abortion that takes place. Because not all trained health professionals are entitled to document those opinions. So what we have is a travesty in our constitution. Okay? And we cannot ride along with it. That's why the most recent case decided to overrule the Malindi case and say abortion is not a fundamental right. It is a limitation on the right to life. So it should be read restrictively, not permissively. The highest attainable standard of healthcare requires that the best available practitioner, the best available doctor is the one who forms the opinion that this abortion should happen because the life or health of this individual is in danger. When we insist on trained health professionals and making it available to everyone, we undermine actually the health care of our citizens. Thank you.
Mavishi, we're not lawyers, most of us here. There's a shout out to you, Richard. There's a battle going on here. He's quoting the Constitution. He's quoting the Constitution. What does that mean for us, layman people?
And I think it's what Derek had alluded to in what the Constitution really focuses on. Because when the Constitution was coming in place, people had their values, they had their beliefs, especially in the specific provision of access to safe and legal abortion. And the Constitution comes to, of course, now bridge, or rather to bring all these opinions to a unified agreement, which is, of course, the aspect of even life begins at conception, was an agreeable consensus that arrived upon where now access to safe and legal abortion was to be guaranteed so long as that provision is there. But just to respond to what Richard was saying in terms of healthcare, and I think also my colleague has come with documents that, of course, now even back what the state's responsibility to protect life means when it comes to the aspect of access to safe and legal abortion. What the Constitution means for us is definitely from a rights-based approach. And I like the fact that, of course, we have highlighted the aspect of right to life. And I'd like to disagree a bit to the extent what Kechi had said, that the life of the mother and the fetus have the same right.
And the baby.
Because when you look at the Article 26.2, it recognizes the value of life. It doesn't now say that the life begins at conception, that is a right. The same way he has mentioned that abortion is a limitation to the right to life. Article 2 doesn't now extend to say that life begins at conception and that right begins there. It just recognizes that life begins, and medics will try to, of course, explain the stages of development of a fetus up to the point that now it becomes viable for it to be delivered to now be a human independent with their own rights. So to that extent, then it values now, we're trying to now compare that the right of the mother, the right of the fetus supersedes that the right of the mother when it comes to making the decision. And the Constitution was very clear, as it has also been highlighted in the Constitution interpretation that was made in the case that Kimani has shared, where the court was trying to say that in this provision, life or health of the mother does not now introduce the understanding that now the fetal right should now be considered when this decision is being made. It's the life, the health of this individual that we're seeing right now has to take priority over the life of the fetal right, of the fetal being. And then also to extend in terms of how the Article 43(1)(a), which has been provided, reading together with the one for emergency treatment. When you're looking at reproductive health care, with the little knowledge that I have in biology, reproductive health care focuses on your reproductive system. The reproductive system looks at the elements that are going to reproduce your ovaries, your uterus, and all that. So when you come to the conversation that abortion is not healthcare, then we're trying to say that the provision of Article 41(3) is misleading in its provision. And they were part of that discussion in terms of even sharing their opinions on why it was to be included reproductive healthcare. When you go back to the Healthcare Act, it talks about access to information. You are entitled as a user to be told access to safe and legal abortion, the pros, the cons, the disadvantages, and the Ministry of Health has provided guidelines into managing abortion, including managing your mental wellness when it occurs. So, of course, to use the rationale that it's traumatizing to now make a unified belief that abortion is wrong or abortion should not be allowed, even in such circumstances, then it really now begs to say that women's rights, when it comes to the fetal rights, are non-existing, and then we should just protect the fetal rights, regardless of this person who has rights which have been recognized and they're protected from Article, I think it's 19 to 50, which has recognized these rights for a person who's already existing.
I don't think we are saying we are disregarding the women's rights. We, in fact, acknowledge that every woman in this room has a right to make a decision. But as she's making a decision, she needs to think that the person she's carrying in the womb also has a right, of which the Constitution does not say that it's a fetus. It says every person has a right to life. And it also says that the life of this person who has a right to life begins at conception. Now, I'm not a lawyer. I was just perusing through the Constitution, and I bumped into Article 29, which says that this person we're talking about in the womb should not be subjected to torture, treated or punished in a cruel, inhumane, or degrading manner. Now, if you understand some of the processes of abortion, you will be, disheartened to even have this conversation. Because when a baby in the womb is cut into pieces, I'm post-abortive, and in one of my abortions, I was shown the pieces of the babies that was removed from my womb. I mean, it's dehumanizing, as the Constitution says. When a baby is suffocated in the womb with saline solution, it's dehumanizing. When a baby is denied progesterone, which helps the baby to grow in the womb, is dehumanizing. Now, when you look at some of those processes, surely, this is a person. Don't we feel some empathy towards them? Okay.
Okay. Where adoption is not a realistic alternative to abortion. If you agree with that statement, please step forward.
So, adoption may be an alternative to parenting, but it is not an alternative to abortion. Why? Because it is not an alternative for pregnancy. The woman will still be pregnant, right? It is not an alternative for childbirth, right? It is not an alternative for the medical risks that the woman encounters when she is carrying that particular pregnancy. It is not an alternative to the trauma that women sometimes suffer through pregnancy, right? It is not an alternative to the bodily invasion of women that carry the particular pregnancy, right? And so pregnancy itself involves hemorrhage, it involves hypertension, sometimes disability, psychological trauma, and in other instances, even death, right? So we cannot say that you can solve forced pregnancy by offering adoption services in the end. We live in Kenya right now. We live in Kenya, right? You know the societal and economic conditions in the country that we live in, right? How many people are adopting? How many people are adopting? How many people are adopting? I'll leave it at that.
I think I'll not even add more to what Derek has said, because it's not realistic, because when you look at even the process of adoption, it might look as easy as is, even though it's provided in law. Adoption is not an option for a woman who has chose from the start to terminate this pregnancy, and they're given this alternative to, of course, consider. Looking at how the practice of adoption is, when you look at what the Children's Act provides on instances of adoption, a majority of cases for adoption largely are children who have been abandoned, or children who, for example, yes, they had parents but have orphaned. And then there's the other option of where a person or parents deliberately offer the child to be adopted, which, of course, the third is not something that is primarily done, where parents automatically just give their parental rights to, of course, this child to be adopted. The first one is, of course, where children have been abandoned. And then in terms of all that process, when you're looking at it, even costly for women who are being subjected to consider adoption as an option, it's not also favorable for them. So if we push this idea that you can go through the pregnancy, you're not being supported going through that pregnancy. But in the end now, you're being told that adoption is an option. It's not free. For even that child to be declared free for adoption, there are processes, legal processes that have to undergo for this person to actually be declared free to adopt. In terms of even choosing parents to, Derek has actually bring it out. How many people willingly, right now even if you're to say, there's 3 children outside that they can willingly adopt. Most people will have a choice to decide, I am adopting because, not because you're barren. Other people actually even adopt when they still even are able to have children. So in terms of pushing now adoption as an option, actually limits the rights of this woman to choose how to undergo this pregnancy. Because as it has been mentioned, it's not an alternative for this person to undergo what pregnancy women undergo through. When, of course, facing those challenges, it's not factored in. So to weigh in that adoption is a primary option that this woman can undergo, it's being unrealistic to them.
All right, let's have disagreeers join us.
Okay, let me begin. I think we are making a lot of assumptions with our submissions when we say that women are not adopted, couples or women or people are not adopting, and that we talk about street children who are not being adopted. My organization, like I said, helps vulnerable women who are faced with a crisis pregnancy, and when they come, we take them through all the options, and when they choose adoption, we connect them to an adoption agency who have also counselors who sit with them and talk to them and hear them out. And in fact, we don't just allow them to give the baby up for adoption as, something that they must do. We also hear what they think and what they want, rather them. And we take seriously into consideration that the life of that baby is precious. And that's why the systems, you talked about the systems of adoption in this nation, are a bit stringent, because we've had babies being trafficked out of Africa, babies being trafficked out of Kenya to be sex workers and sex slaves. People are selling babies. We've seen documentaries in our news stations about that. And so, if the law is protecting both the mother and the person in the womb, there has to be stringent measures on how this person is going to be adopted out. And that's why the systems have to protect this baby. And also, a lot of counseling has to go through this woman to understand what she is doing. Now, adoption is better because at least we are giving this person in the womb a chance to live. And like any of our lives here, all of us here, we've gone through issues in life. Yeah? We cannot remove problems from people's lives. Problems are part of life. How do we empower this person as she's carrying this baby to think about the implications of adoption in future? And that's why she has to go through counseling, to prepare her for the choice that she's making of adoption. And so I feel that when we compare adoption and abortion, the other is better than killing of this child who is growing in the womb.
All right.
Thank you. Yes.
Richard.
We usually say adoption, not abortion. It is deliberate. Why? Because one of the major reasons women and girls rush to abortion is the thinking, how am I going to take care of this child? It is not the intervening period of the difficulties of pregnancy. It is usually, how am I going to look after this baby? So the counselors who listen to the women tell you that that is the pressure. This boy has denied responsibility for the child. The parents are not willing to take me in. How am I going to look after this child? And that's when the proposal for adoption comes into play. And that's why we say that adoption is a viable alternative to abortion. Of course, the adoption processes should be improved. Okay? In fact, the state should be investing more in protecting adoptive parents and supporting adoptive parents so that those who are giving up children can have the possibility of surrendering them without choosing to kill their babies in the womb. So adoption is a viable option to abortion.
All right, thank you very much. I would like to bring this more into perspective by citing a report that was, I think, released last year, a Kenyan report that is titled "The Incidence of Induced Abortion and the Severity of Abortion, Related Complications in Kenya." This is a report that was done by by the Ministry of Health, the Kenyan Ministry of Health, with the support of a group called the African Population and Health Research Center and the Guttmacher Institute. All right? What did this report...
Sorry, please repeat the institute?
Guttmacher Institute.
Okay.
What did this report reveal? All right? This report revealed that from the period of April 2023 to May of 2024, in Kenya, we had 792,694 cases of induced abortions. 792,694. That equates to 2,000 abortions being done daily in Kenya. So as we sit here, there are certain instances of abortion being induced in Kenya. But I would like to break these statistics further. 80% of the individuals that were conducting these 92,694 abortions were none other but married women. All right? Married women. or women living together with their partners. Okay? So in many quarters, you will hear the conversation of abortion being an alternative to women that are reckless, that don't want to face their consequences, right? But the 80%, and it's predominantly a conversation that is used to target young women, the unmarried ones, right? But the statistics tell a different story. 65% of this 80% were women that had previously given birth before. And 66% indicated that they were not using contraceptive because they feared certain side effects that would arise out of this. What does this picture indicate to you? That while we have options, an option of contraceptive, you can decide, in fact, I will not have sex at all. It's an option. We will not even be speaking about the questions of adoption, right? of abortion and adoption, if you decide to remain celibate. You can decide that while I engage in sexual conduct, I will use contraceptives, right? And I will use many, there are varied contraceptive methods that are available. You are told, you are informed of those options, and you choose what method you want. But in the event then that you have become pregnant, you could choose as well to put the baby up for adoption, right? But the law, especially, and I would like to make reference to this particular document here. This is called the National Guidelines on the Management of Sexual Violence in Kenya. It is a document that is developed by the government of Kenya itself. And it speaks to incidences where an individual has become pregnant as a result of sexual violence. So it is incest, rape, and all those things. And I want to read out to you what it says, right?
And keep it brief, please.
Yes, briefly. That what are my rights? This is the document by the government. What are my rights as a survivor of sexual violence? Okay? You have the right to choose when, where, and how, and with whom to have sex, engage in consensual sex in all situations at all times, and listen to this, so that you don't say it's my creation, access termination of pregnancy and post-abortion care in the event of pregnancy from rape as a matter of right. That is the law.
Okay.
Is that the law?
Nah, forget.
Oh.
Good people. I'm going to tell you something that is very unique. The pro-death entities, okay, have gotten a grip of our institutions. And I'll give you an example. This is the policy relating to sexual violence, okay? We have a policy on reproductive health, which as KCPF we had an opportunity to influence so that it is very pro-life and pro-family. These entities that are pro-death, which are the biggest funders of the Ministry of Health, closed the tap for money because of that policy. But when they get a policy such as this, influenced without us, because we never had an opportunity to participate, okay? Oh yes. You cannot create rights in policy documents. Rights are deliberated upon, and we get them into the Constitution and into statutes. Okay? Now, that document, in fact, you've just reminded me we need to contest this document because it is unconstitutional. Okay? It is unconstitutional. Thank you.
Can I also say that I like that he's brought the statistics by Good Matcha, but I also want to submit that Good Matcha is a pro-abortion organization. And wait, guys, I'm the sweetest person in the room. Please don't make me get fired up. Listen, the Kenya Bureau of Statistics, which is a government organization, released statistics in the same year that said only 300 women procure abortions in a month. And let's not even talk about statistics. Please tell me, how many times can a woman get pregnant in a year? Once. How many times can a man make a woman pregnant in a day? In a day. Why are we making this burden become a man's burden? And even he's talked about women have the choice of getting contraceptives, while men do not have contraceptives. We are the ones carrying the burden of reproductive health, yet the men are left to go scot-free. And abortion has been designed to be a contraception for men to make a woman pregnant and walk and not take responsibility of their actions. Guys, wake up.
Let me. I think I'm a bit excited in the lining of Kechi is taking in terms of this discussion. But of course, just to bring back in terms of the conversation of adoption, looking at it even in terms of how we approach, they're actually being pro-choice, because what Nkechi had actually even said, that where they center, if a woman walks into a clinic and their first choice is, of course, they want to terminate their pregnancy, regardless of any reason, whether it's economic, whether their health is at risk, it's an option that has been provided for them. And she has actually even mentioned the aspect of counseling. To the little knowledge that I have when it comes to psychosocial and mental health support that is being given, it's to give agency to a person who's seeking these services, not to give them, to make choices for them. Because when they come to seek this psychosocial support, it means their mental wellness is a bit unbalanced, and I stand guided. It's a bit unbalanced. So the essence of a trained professional to provide psychosocial support is to enable this person to make an informed choices. And a good question I'd want to ask also in Kechi is, if this person still undergoes counseling, and they still decide that they want to get access to safe and legal abortion, it's a healthcare services that you're supposed to provide. And in circumstances where a woman, yes, you give them this option of adoption, we live in a society that, one, if you take that option, you might actually be subjected to more stigma of choosing adoption than abortion when compared to that. We live in a society that if you're seen that you've carried a baby for all this time, and then the 9 months, then the 10th month we come to ask and then you don't have a child, the repercussion of that, depending on the society that we have, a woman is likely, or a young girl is likely to face more stigma or more discrimination on the fact that, one, they'll be labeled reckless, they'll be labeled not willingly to take responsibility on an action that they willingly choose. So for me, I want to understand, when you're saying, of course, counseling is applied for persons to consider adoption, is it counseling that is provided for them to choose only one side? And if they still stick to the aspect that I've gone through counseling and the check of that this person has undergone mental healthness a check, and they still decide that they want to have access to safe and legal abortion, what is our response to that?
When the woman comes to us and they're in distress, we take them through all the options. That is parenting, adoption, and abortion. When they choose adoption, we connect them with an adoption agency where they go through further counseling to ascertain if really they want to give the baby up for adoption, or they want to parent the baby, or they want to have an abortion. And if they choose abortion, we work with a medical doctor called Dr. Ohomengare. All the women, actually, I was going to use this to answer Derek, where he was talking about pregnant women go through high blood pressure and all that. We have a doctor on standby who checks these women free of charge, by the way, free of charge, and give them all the health care that they need. So by the time this woman has gone through our hands, through an adoption agency, and through the doctor, and they still choose abortion, we set them free, because we've given them all the cushioning they need.
All right. There you go.
Just to respond to especially my senior here, that states that a policy cannot create rights, and that he's very excited to challenge this particular policy. My senior, you are a little bit late. It was already challenged, and the court affirmed whatever the policy says. Let me read it out to you so that you don't think it's a creation of my imagination. So he says that the respondents argue, so the respondents were them, all right? The respondents argue that these guidelines are not. Oh, this is paragraph 36. Paragraph 36. Please, petition 266 of 2015, FIDA Kenya and 3 others versus the Attorney General and 3 others. At paragraph 366, you can read with me along. That's why I have these documents here, right? It's at the High Court. It's still not been decided, and the case is still in force, right? the decision of the High Court is still in force. So it is still just pending on appeal, but there's no stay. You can tell us where the stay was sought, and we will follow with you.
Yeah,
My senior, you can also do that. Let me finish, right? Yeah. The respondents, them, argue that these guidelines are not any other written law as provided under Article 26(4). Their position is that the only law in force in respect to abortion is the Penal Code, whose provisions we have set out in the judgment. That is what they were arguing, right? How did the court respond? The court responds in this paragraph, and I've just screenshotted it here so that for ease of reference, at paragraph 367. Read it with me. We make two observations with respect to this act of Parliament that having the bearing on the question of abortion. First, that it is correct that the Penal Code prohibits abortion. However, it is an act of Parliament that predates the Sexual Offences Act of 2016 and the Constitution. These provisions of the Sexual Offences Act, which is later in times, we take this view, bearing in mind the doctrine of implied repeal, SCIA, under which the provisions of an act are inconsistent with the provisions of earlier. The earlier provisions may impliedly be repealed by the latter legislation. Okay? Are we together, mpaka hapo? If they be impliedly repealed by that provision, what does it mean? It is thus, to us, under the Constitution, in the Sexual Offences Act, that the general rule is that abortion is... Oh my God, why is it refreshing? Let me just read it to you. It is refreshing. It's technology, all right? Let me read it to you. Okay? Let me read it to you. All right? We have dealt... Just let me read it to you.
Yes. Also, when you finish...
Yes.
In one sentence, you will explain to us.
Yes,
we don't
what all that
understand
means.
that language.
No problem.
What you mean?
That is my work. Yeah? In our view, therefore, so this is the view of the court. In our views, therefore, women and girls in Kenya who find themselves pregnant as a result of sexual violence, do what? Now listen to this carefully. Have a right under Kenyan law to have an abortion performed by a trained health professional if that health professional forms the opinion that the life or health of the mother is in danger.
Hello.
Wait. You'll get a chance to engage. Yes.
Okay, good people.
It's already been challenged and it's already been affirmed.
Derek.
So if you want to challenge, you can do so. And they say they were
Allow
not
me.
involved. Public participation
Derek.
is already
Derek.
an existence position
Please
to
allow
challenge
me.
laws. Challenge it there.
Yes.
Proceed.
But I only want you to challenge it in a minute.
Yes. Good people, let's simply how the courts work. He's referring to a high court decision. And we have a very recent Court of Appeal decision that actually already affirms the provisions of the Penal Code. Okay? Secondly, good people. I have very many ladies in this room, and I need to speak to them. If someone says that one of the rights you have is to kill your baby because it is a product of rape, okay? And you've gone through all this counseling and all these processes and you still decide to kill the baby, you're free. The challenge is this. You will have removed all the evidence we have to pin down the rape. I'm telling you.
Aya. Kidogo. Sini sawa. Evidence. Aya. Order. Sawa. Okay.
Let me explain. If a conception occurs as a result of the real way to place at the scene of is the DNA connection between the rape and the conceived baby.
No. Aya ni sawa.
Very many rape cases fail. And the strongest evidence
Can I
is
chime
removed.
in?
Richard.
Can I chime in?
No. Banning abortion is a form of control. If you agree with that statement, please step forward. Mavishi, How is it a form of control?
Thank you. Before I respond to that, I think let me touch base on the last conversation that we had, especially where we concluded by the fact that encouraging, or rather pushing, that women who have undergone sexual violence to retain a child, to of course support prosecution, it's really, I don't even know what the word is, but I think I'll find it, because when you look at what the law defines in terms of what ascertains as defilement, it talks about the aspect of unlawful, it talks about the aspect of penetration, which did not affirm a consent, and then it criminalizes in terms of what punishment is supposed to be accorded. And what, of course, now mandates the prosecution or the police to investigate should not primarily be the first thing, that for conviction to happen, that the child who has undergone defilement and the proceeds of rape should be primarily be the ones to determine a conviction in such case. So, of course, to assume that now that is the only thing that should be used to, of course, convict these people, then we are really not really understanding what investigation really looks like. Because in most cases, penetration can happen and then the person does not automatically conceive. So what will happen to such cases? Such messages is encouraging, or rather, it's telling women who have undergone such experiences to continue carrying the baby to term, which is traumatizing, to subject them to that whole process. But then again, we'll give them a response to get into that. To get into your prompt,
Yes.
Banning abortion is a form of control, yes. And I think it has been said here by some of the speakers who have come, because it is giving women, or rather, it's limiting women opportunity, as I said, bodily autonomy. It has been said here that we are pro-death. I'd like to counter that and saying that anti-choice and anti-rights, in a way that subjecting a women, even the extent of limiting access to safe and legal abortion, to be on the fact that an opinion-trained healthcare professional has to decide on what you do to your body, is in form of control. When we have cases of where, for example, if you suffer from a terminal disease, it is obligated for a medical officer or a trained healthcare professional to give you all the information for you to make a decision. Banning abortion not only criminalizes or it stigmatizes women to have access to unsafe and illegal abortion, which in terms they end up either having complications. We saw in the case of which has been highlighted, the Fida Kenya case, where the case of that young girl, she had access to unsafe and legal abortion, which manifested in a way that she had complications which led to her having kidney problems. And at the end, it resulted to death. So banning, of course, and also when you're looking at it in terms of comparing, it's class. Looking at it from a point of class, it limits the access to women who cannot afford services to be excluded, to be criminalized because of their status.
It is without a doubt that the ban on abortions seeks to disproportionately control, first, if not anything else, women's bodies, right? It also seeks to control their sexuality. It seeks to control their economic futures. It seeks to control their education. It seeks to control even their participation in social life, right? And no other person, unless I am uninformed, has ever been legally compelled to use their body to do things like donate organs. Is there a law that says you have to donate organs? Is there any other law that says you have to donate blood? It's always a question of persuasion, right? They persuade you and you make the informed choice whether to donate organs or whether to donate blood or whether to even undergo a surgery. The Health Act, less law, but our legal system does not compel you even to take treatment that you do not want, right? So why, when it comes to the questions of pregnancy, is the state having the say in forcing and coercing you to have a child or not have a child? Why are they having a say in relation to that? We might attribute it to patriarchy and the desire of men to control women's bodies. We might attribute it to colonialism and the desire of the colonialists to impose their Christian beliefs on your body. So there is nothing else that we can argue on this particular platform that will lead us to the inevitable conclusion that abortion and the banning of abortion is control, but not control on men, not control on any other people, but the demography that is women and girls. Thank you.
All right, karibuni sana our disagreeers.
Okay, so like I said, one of the things that I do apart from counseling the women who are vulnerable and are faced in a crisis pregnancy is that we take them through post-abortive women, we take them through a healing program. And I've done this for 15 years, and I've seen very many women come through my hands from all walks of life, socioeconomic, religions, and different ages, and also different circumstances where they got pregnant, and rape is one of them, even. And one thing they come to seek for is healing after an abortion. Because at the time when they were having their abortion, they were told that it was their right. They were told that it will solve your problem. They were told that, you know, you'll have a bright future after that. But what they started seeing in their lives is their psychological selves breaking down. There's something we call post-abortion syndrome or post-abortion traumatic disorder. And honestly, I've gone through it even before I understood what it is. I came to understand post-abortion syndrome much later in life, but I remember my life stopped after my abortions. I couldn't understand myself.
Is it the same for every woman or is it different?
I will come to that. I will come to that. I couldn't understand myself. I felt like I was very depressed. I was suicidal. I tried to commit suicide twice. Now, the problem with post-abortion syndrome is one, just like HIV and AIDS, it's not put on your face. So you cannot know. Many women don't know that they're going through post-abortion syndrome until they encounter the information out there about post-abortion syndrome. And this is how, when I knew what I was going through, or rather when I started talking about it, that this is what abortion did to me, I had many women come to me and say, I recognize that because my life stopped at this time. Now, when a woman goes through an abortion, the first emotion is relief because they've solved a crisis. I don't have to think about the baby anymore. But after that, when the guilt comes, they start justifying that actually it's my right to have an abortion. And when the justification wears down, they start suppressing it. And when they cannot suppress anymore, they employ coping mechanisms. And that's why many young women don't see that they actually have post-abortion syndrome because they're either suppressing, justifying, or employing coping mechanisms. And coping mechanisms can take you for so many years. I have had women in their 50s come for post-abortion care, or rather for psychological healing. And some of them had abortions in countries where abortion was legal. So if legalizing abortion or saying that it's your right to have an abortion gives you safety from psychological effects, then these women would not come. Let me address the issue of now. As Mwavisi, my sister said, Mwavishi, sorry, is a traumatic event. That's the word you use. Abortion is also a traumatic event. This woman is being subjected to 2 traumas in her life. When, in as much as I wouldn't wish my best enemy to go through, is also trauma and can be cancelled through and the baby given adoptive parents to take care of them, and this woman is free from a second trauma in their lives. Number 2, abortion does not erase the fact that a woman has been raped. Number 3, the perpetrator, like my brother said, is let to go scot-free because, first of all, the checks and balances that are put after a situation, many women don't go through those checks and balances. Many women don't report a immediately it's done. For them to go through, you know, the clothes to be tested, the vaginal fluids to be tested, for them to ascertain that somebody has been raped. So many times we think that when you have an abortion, it will solve this problem, but it actually does not solve the problem. We need to understand that when a woman is raped and they're subjected to abortion, that woman will have to carry 2 traumas in their life. Now, you will say that not many women have this experience. The truth is that, like I've said, I've had women in their 50s come, they never thought that they would actually face post-abortion trauma, but they actually face it. So until a woman dies, you cannot say a woman cannot face post-abortion trauma.
All right. Okay. Richard, let's keep it at 1 minute, 30 seconds, please.
I disagree with the view that the ban on abortion is a form of control. In fact, I hold the view that the proliferation of abortion is the epitome of control. And this is how the control flows. Friends, listen. I get your children highly sexualized by age 9 or 10. Because they still have to go to school, they will demand contraception. And when contraception fails, they will demand abortion. Do you see the chain of the money maker along the way? Oh, you don't see it. You choose to be blind. Friends, whoever wants abortion on demand is not thinking about the women. They are thinking of anything else other than the women in question. We have population to control. We have money to make off the abortions. We have research to do on the fetuses, as you call them. Okay, the entire process is wired to turn the woman's body into a source of revenue. So they who proliferate abortion are the ones controlling women. Those who ban abortion are granting women freedom. Thank you.
All right, I want to take this conversation somewhere. When we were researching this topic and what people are saying online, and something that has been coming up here is irresponsibility. So, one of the tweets that we saw was, consenting to unprotected sex is consenting to pregnancy. I want to know in the room, how do you guys feel about it? Consenting to unprotected sex is consenting to pregnancy.
Can I go first?
Let me just respond to that. We are adults in this room. We are above 18. No one can control anyone here not to have sex. I usually say if somebody wants to have sex at lunchtime, early in the morning, in the park, they can have sex. But at the end of the day, we need to understand that one of the reasons for sex is to produce babies. So as you're wait. One of the others is bonding and all that. But since we are talking about babies in the womb, is that when I choose to have sex because I have the right to have sex, I should know that it is the way that I can produce a baby. So.
No, proceed.
Yeah, so as I'm making that choice to have sex, and like I said, it's anyone's right to have sex whenever they want to. Let's also think about this child that we're bringing to the world. And it's easier to make that choice about the child before you have the sex than make that choice when the baby's already in the womb.
All right, Derek,
Okay.
you want to say something? Wait, let's give Derek an opportunity first, and then...
I think that particular sentiment is absurd, and we cannot even dignify to the response. All right, and so just to respond to then the questions of post-abortion depression and all those things, right? We empathize.
Derek,
Yeah?
I don't think it's absurd because it has come up.
No,
in
it
this
has come up, but then it
conversation.
is legally
I
untenable.
I believe every... No, I'm not going to allow you to move away from this one. No. Wait. I think it's a statement that deserves to be addressed because it's a view that a lot of people hold. And if there's an alternative perspective, it would be nice for it to be put out there so that other
Can I
people
respond?
can get to.
All right, thank you.
Let's have Derek first.
So I'll respond. Consenting to have sexual relations is not consenting to have children. That's it. Many of us have had sexual relations, but we are not consenting to have children. All right? And we are saying that we should still have the choice to decide when we want the children. Right now, we have decided we do not want those children. And in the event that we want them, we will have them. And in the event that we do not want them, nobody should criminalize us. It's a simple conversation. We empathize with the women and girls that have faced depression as a result of abortion, all right? Just like we also empathize with the women and girls that have faced postpartum depression, all right? And the empathy that we have for these two classes of women cannot be used as a basis to justify the limitation of other people's rights. Thank you.
Sawa.
Okay.
Good one. For the pro-life guys,
Hang on.
why should anyone...
The question is not yet responded to.
You're going to respond to both of these ones.
Okay, all right.
Yes. Why should anyone who's gotten pregnant from sexual violence be forced to carry that baby to term? What rights?
I think I
hear
answered
you.
that
I
question.
hear you.
Yes.
Okay. I'll start with the first one, okay? Consenting to unprotected, and I'm putting unprotected in quotes, okay? Good people. Pregnancy is not a disease.
Sawa. We hear you.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
Woo. Kidogo tu.
the other side, good people, allow me to have my side.
Allow him
okay?
to. No, wait.
This is the other side.
Guys. Okay, yes. Aya. The point of this entire show is not to hear everything that you agree with. That's not, listen, no. That's not the point of the show. That's why it's called The Other Side. So we have to allow him to give us the opinion from the other side.
Yeah.
And then the defenders from this other side, they will respond. Nisa,
Okay.
are we okay?
So,
Proceed.
you see, we said that this session is going to be philosophical. So we are going to deploy logic and proper rational reasoning. Okay? Now, pregnancy is not a disease. As a result, you cannot be protecting yourself from pregnancy. Okay? When you consent to sexual relations, okay? And remember, sexual relations have two major functions. The unitive or the bonding component of those involved and the procreative. Two functions, unitive and procreative. The idea of protected sex serves to separate the unitive function from the procreative function. We are discussing philosophy here, okay? It serves to separate the unitive function from the procreative function. When you separate those two functions of the sexual act, you get babies without sex or sex without babies. Did I confuse you? When you separate the unitive function of sex from the procreative function through protected sex, you are actually saying it is okay to have babies without sex. You had the in vitro fertilization, etc. You are also saying it is okay to have sex without the possibility of babies. Okay? If it is okay, my reasoning, okay? We are doing philosophy here now, okay? If it is okay to have sexual relations that are closed to sex, are you following? Then bestiality is perfectly okay. If it is okay to have sexual relations close to babies, then necrophilia is perfectly okay.
Wait. Richard, wait.
Listen, in logic, it is agreeable and acceptable to stretch an argument to its absurdity. So the absurdity of sexual relations closed to babies is that necrophilia is okay, bestiality is okay. Okay?
Okay, Mavishi is going to respond to this and then we close this prompt out, please.
Okay, first, let me try and at least, I'd agree to the extent, to the statement that Richard had made, that pregnancy is not a disease in this discussion.
A pro-choice person is speaking. Can you guys give her a chance? Yes.
Yes,
go.
I'd agree with the statement that pregnancy is not a disease to this extent. Today when I was coming here, I saw a post that female officers who are training, I think in Kiganjo, have been let go because they have been found to be pregnant. When we look at pregnancy as a disease, it subjects women to be seen as being vulnerable in a way that they cannot perform duties that they can fully perform, provided they have been guided within the healthcare professionals. They've given them a go-ahead to undertake that. So to that extent, pregnancy is not a disease, I would agree. Because if we weaponize that pregnancy is a disease, it limits women's autonomy to fairly participate in activities that are male-dominated. A good example is that one that I've shared, where women have been let go on the account of them being pregnancy, and it's not that they're 9-month pregnant. They have just been tested. I don't know if it was lawful. They've been tested, and they have been found that they're pregnant, and it has made a conclusion that they cannot really provide services to be trained within the security forces. So to that extent, I would agree. But in terms of consenting to sex is consenting to be pregnant, I would agree with what Derek has said. Most of the time, when you look at even from the context of unprotected sex, the advocacy is, of course, you go, walk into a clinic, you ensure that your health is okay. And generally, and speaking from being radical, when you consent to have unprotected sex, you just want to have a good time. You want to have orgasms that you feel, if you have sex with a condom, might not be there. But the message is, it doesn't now translate that if you consent to have unprotected sex with a person you've walked into a clinic, you've gone through all the tests, you've been given a clean bin of health, that is consenting to pregnancy. It has been given 2 choices. There's the choice that you can either get disease if you don't go through a clinic and you have unprotected sex, and there's an option of having a child out of this unprotected sex. But the same message, you can be able to be given information that in case you have unprotected sex and pregnancy is a result of it, you can have access to P2 to terminate that pregnancy if you don't give. And they give you a window of 72 hours. If I'm wrong, I can be guided. So for me, I agree. It's not consent to have a child. It's a consent for me to have orgasm, to have a good time, to go 1, 2, 3 rounds with my partner. Thank you.
Hey,
I think
no, I can't. Okay. But you can respond in the other one. A woman's right to choose outweighs a potential life. If you agree with that statement, please, step forward. Mavishi.
I agree with the statement because, as you have mentioned, even from the beginning, when you're talking about life begins at conception, it does not outweigh the right of a person who is existing. What we have talked about, and even the question directly puts it, potential life. We're talking about the life that is already existing compared to a potential life that, when you're looking at it, the aspect of viability can differ. So to that extent, I'll just try to respond in a short way. Definitely, it outweighs because the Constitution recognizes the right of a woman to supersede the right of a potential life.
All right, Derek?
I would agree, and just paraphrase what the Constitution provides in the sense that while the Constitution has agreed that we are recognizing that life is beginning at conception, and while we have all these protections that have been put by law, to protect this potential life, you have women being able to go to maternity, and being taken care of for the purposes of preserving these questions of maternal life. The Constitution does not stop there, or our law do not stop there. They acknowledge privacy. They acknowledge your dignity as a woman. They acknowledge your agency and your autonomy and your right not to be subjected to cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment. All these acknowledgements, therefore, mean that having assessed all these acknowledgements together, your rights, your choices in exercising those rights will definitely, without a doubt, outweigh that of a potential life that in many instances cannot even exist without you, right? Thank you.
All right, let's have the disagreeers join us. Going to start with you, Kechi.
Okay, thank you. So,
A minute, 30 seconds.
I think I have a problem with the word potential because, as we've seen, Article 26, sub-article 1 and 2, the Constitution affirms that this life is a person. It doesn't say the person is less of a person or potential. If we go by the law, the Constitution agrees that this person is a person. So if this person is a person, then all the rights that the mother has, the person has a right to enjoy them. That's not subject to discussion. It is there, it is the law, it's the Constitution. We must agree to it.
Richard.
Thank you very much. Since you decided to go back to the law, the state has a duty in human rights terms to respect human rights of its people, to protect the rights of its people, and to promote the rights of its people. I never knew in all of my life that I would get a situation where people choose to put the right to life at the same pedestal with the right to choose. Because, friends, listen, just as Akecha said, this baby in the womb is entitled to food the way you eat, the right to food. It is housed in the mother's belly the way you're entitled to housing. Okay? The healthcare mother is visiting clinic all the time for the benefit of herself and for the baby in the womb. For goodness sake, these are the most vulnerable human beings we have on planet Earth. Why should we be asking mothers that they should place their right to choose to kill them above their right to choose to protect them? Okay? So, I would be pro-choice in the sense that I stand for the choice of the mother to keep the baby. And I don't celebrate the choice to kill the baby. Thank you.
All right. Something else. Yes, okay. Something else that came up in the research was this statement, a woman's right to choose. And the thing that we kept getting was, then it takes two to tango. Should a man have any say in this particular decision? Derek, I know you wanted to say something, so say what you wanted to say and then respond to that.
If a man was to have any say, the law would have given him that say. And he cannot have the say. The Constitution is already clear that it is the opinion of who? The trained health professional when examining who? The mother, right? And the questions of health relate to an individual that we are calling a user. Who is the user of these health services? Is it the man? It's not the man. And these are questions that ought to be left squarely within the rights of the user. And who's the user when it comes to the question of the abortion? It is the woman. And so where are the men coming into this conversation? And I would like to let you know that the provisions of sections the provisions that criminalize abortions are used by men to ensure that the ladies that they are having relationships that they have impregnated, for example, are arrested and prosecuted when they want to commit an abortion. We have had cases where a man goes and reports to the police that the abortion is taking place there. That woman is trying to kill my child. And the police come in the middle of a procedure and they arrest that woman and they put them in cells. What we ought to remember, and I think we agree on this with our colleagues, that the question of pro-choice is not one that is seeking to coerce anybody to have an abortion. It is not a question that is seeking to coerce anybody to keep children. It is a question of giving them the option to take, either decide to, and it's a simple conversation. If you want me converted to Christianity, you do not arrest me for it. If you want me to start smoking with you, you do not arrest me for it. What do? You persuade me and you say, these are the benefits of doing this thing. And I make an informed choice on whether I want to do that action that you want me to do. And that is the question of abortion. It is a deeply personal health issue, and criminal sanctions, coercion, cannot be the path that we take to coerce people into keeping children that they do not want or into keeping pregnancies that they do not want. The question is, if you want to have 70 babies, have them. If you want to have one child, have that. If you want to have no children, do not have any children.
Do you wanna respond?
Yes, I want to respond to that.
Yes, please.
Whenever we are doing counseling to a woman who is faced with a crisis pregnancy, the highly likely chances of her keeping the baby is when the man steps in and says that this is my child and I want to keep it. And because the Constitution of Kenya covers that man as somebody with rights, and one of the rights is to parent the child. The child has a right to a father as well. Let's not deny this child's right to a father. And for that reason, we cannot eliminate these men from this conversation because they're the seed givers, we are the seed receivers, and both of them play a role in having this child come into the world. And so I feel like it's double standards when a man here who is talking about abortion to women is also saying that men should not talk about abortion, it should not be in this conversation of a baby that is growing in a man. It's double standards. If men should not have this conversation, then he should not have this conversation.
Maybe if I can respond. I think what Derek, and maybe I think to counterattack the statement that you're saying, the conversation is not that men should not be part of abortion. I think it has to be differentiated with the decision to access safe abortion. In terms of them being part and parcel, especially if you're in a relationship with this person, they can be involved to understand the circumstances, the choices, the process, and all that. But in terms of now making the decision, and that's why it's guided, a trained healthcare professional will give information to the users. It has been said by Derek. I am the one who's carrying this baby to term. I'm going to experience this from month 1 up to month 9. So the decision solely lies on me. In terms of men being part and parcel, it is to support, not now to come and say, don't terminate because this is my child. It's because it is happening in that person's body. The changes are going to happen in this person's body. So the decisions have to be made by this person from an informed point where the doctor, the trained healthcare professional, provides all these circumstances. For me, I agree to the extent that let them be part and parcel so that it can also not be seen just as a woman's issue, because it's a society issue when you're looking at access to safe and legal abortion. Because a lot of times, and it was alluded, most of the women who would sort to that choice, it can be in terms of economic support to this child. The man has gotten them pregnant, they're nowhere to be seen. In cases where you have been violently raped or violently violated sexually, you might not know your perpetrator. So you might not even know how to even engage this person to make a decision. So it should be solely left to the person who's going to experience it to make that decision from an informed point, from a trained healthcare professional.
Can I respond to that?
So I only have 2 minutes. So let's do
Okay,
this.
give it to Kaketo.
Yes. Use the 2 minutes and then we conclude.
Good people, the Constitution under Article 26(4) does not grant the woman a right to choose. The opinion is expected from a trained health professional. It is the trained health professional who determines that the life is in danger and that the health is in danger. So, to protect the right to life of the preborn person, we would require that the opinion is documented, that I saw this kind of decision or position, I diagnosed this, and I prescribe that this woman's life is in danger if we do not terminate this pregnancy. Unfortunately, whoever is pushing for this option to be available is not insisting that these opinions are documented. The result is going to be an abuse of women further and further. If we just opened that gate and did not regulate and restrict the conduct of the trained health professionals, we will actually be impacting on the choice of the mothers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Choice. Hey? Eh? Choice. We chose to come here today. You chose to dress however you chose to dress. You looked at yourself in the mirror. And you're like, this is good. Let me go out. But now there's this one choice that becomes very complicated. This one that has one side that believes that it should solely be in the mother's hand to decide what she wants for herself. But we have another side that says that it's not just the mother's life that's at stake. And that's the representation in this room. It's all of those people in that range who believe in those different ideas. And we argue online, on Twitter, we rage bait each other, we get mad because we're not seeing the people in real life because we're behind screens. I just want to big you up for coming so that we can see each other. Now you're seeing someone who argues for pro-life before you saying the things that they're not afraid to say. Same for pro-choice. They're here before you, arguing with confidence, and they're not afraid to say these things. And the point of this platform is that what you hear from this stage here, you take it up with your friends. Go talk to other people. Interrogate your ideas. If you want to change your mind, change your mind. If you don't want to change your mind, it's good. At least you're going to have a stronger belief. So I want you to help me appreciate this, ladies and gentlemen who showed up and showed out on here. We can get louder than that. Make some noise for these people.